Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and I got a video for you all today that I'm sure you expected. Pretty standard tier list video. I'm going to be ranking all the decks that are from Lost Origin and like the decks and all the decks in the meta. So all the decks before Lost Origin and the new decks. And I made my own tier list because I looked at some other tier lists, but they seem to be missing some stuff, so I added everything else. And it should have pretty much all the decks. I'm going to be ranking them A through F. If there's an S tier deck, I'd put one. I don't think there's any deck that's really that much better than every other deck, though. So A is obviously the best. F is really bad. B is fine, certainly viable. C might even be viable. Probably don't play D, and then F is really bad. So starting off with Palkia here, Origin form Palkia V-Star, and this is obviously A tier. Really good deck right now. You can play it with Kyurem VMAX, which is here, but this is Palkia Inteleon, or it could include Palkia Mew, I guess, but pretty much Palkia, where you just do big damage with Palkia, set up consistently. You can also throw in some techs, notably, obviously, a Radiant Greninja, which you can attack with, and also Empoleon V is really good right now, so that's probably the go-to tech that I'd throw in. It really helps against Lost Zone decks, which there's a bunch of, as well as some of the Rogue single prize decks, which you'll run into a lot as well. So it's a really strong deck with some really good options right now. And there aren't too many Lightning decks that are like particularly good, and there also are a lot of decks that it can just beat. So it's very good. And we got Machamp VMAX, which is pretty underwhelming. It does, I think it's 220 for 2 if you have damage on one of your bench Pokemon. So usually that's with Lucario, Gapechar, Bog, the new Gengar as well. It's okay. It's not a great typing though. Fighting type isn't too good. There's some Arceus right now. There are a lot of decks that play Arceus as like a backup engine, but its weakness to Psychic is pretty bad because there's a lot of Mew. And it's a bit of an awkward, inconsistent deck. It's not bad, but it's not a deck I'd really choose to play. Same thing probably goes with Darkrai V-Star. One of the V-Stars, Machamp's a VMAX. There aren't too many VMAXs because I'm not sure. They're just generally the newer cards are better and more played, but they're generally stronger. So Machamp's a bit underwhelming as a VMAX, but Darkrai here, really nice attack, can just ramp up decently quickly with Dark Patches and the Galarian Moltres V and Baby Galarian Moltres, which are both good, but the deck struggles to hit hard in the early game. It's kind of like some of the energy ramp single prizers, except it's multiple prizes. So it's probably a bit more combo heavy and less consistent, and it can get one shotted by a lot of decks. So it's not in a great spot right now, and I wouldn't really recommend playing it. It's not F. It's playable, but it's not too good. Hisuian Samurai V-Star. This deck's okay. It usually plays the Galarian Weezing and the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, and it's pretty good. It hits good enough damage, and it has a nice V-Star power. It's just a solid attacker, and is paired quite nicely with Weezing, which I don't remember if I put on this list. It looks like I didn't, but there's Weezing, which is really good with that deck and a number of other decks. It's carried by Weezing, I'd say, but the deck's certainly viable. Not a go-to deck, but not a bad one either. We got Dialga V-Star. And this deck's also C. It was really good last format, but it's kind of bad against single prize decks, especially single prize decks that can one-shot it if they play Radiant Charizard or Reshiram Amazing Rare. So it's in a bit of an awkward spot in this current meta because of all the single prize decks, and so it kind of needs to adapt some. It could do a Cheryl Bronzong build, but these usually don't work too well, so you probably just want to go with a different deck. It's not too bad. It's pretty good against like V-Stars and V-Maxes. It can just kind of win and obliterate them, but in a lot of the other matchups, it struggles. Let's see. We got Regis now, and Regis are a decent deck. I'd say they're B. They have really cool combos with Thornton, but they're pretty awkward to set up. So the deck's a bit inconsistent, and a bit weird to play. It doesn't have amazing matchups. There are a lot of dragon decks, so it can't hit those for weakness, and they're all V stars usually, so it won't be able to KO them, and so it struggles a bit in this current meta. But it's still a strong single prize deck that beats Palkia, or it can beat Palkia, Arceus, Mew, um, and even some other stuff. And it with like Radiant Charizard or your Volatile Amazing Rare, which are the techs with Thornton, you can deal with a lot of different stuff. So it's pretty good. It's not like the best deck right now, but it's a good deck that I'd recommend you try out and mess around with. Now we got Aggron VMAX, and this deck is really good with Arceus V-Star. It's only like a 2-1 Aggron, so it's pretty much just Arceus, but it's I think. Aggron is just a decent attacker with Arceus to carry it. I'd say it's probably, it's not A, it's B, but it's strong. It does good damage. It does what it wants to do. It's this high skill ceiling deck, but it's pretty fun. I haven't messed around with it really, but it seems like it has a lot of potential. It's normal Arceus stuff with it's like Arceus Barrel, I think, with just a bit of oomph. With Aggron, there are a bunch of different Arceus Barrel decks that just have like some VMAX usually thrown in, and Aggron's a good one. They're pretty much all solid, but Arceus V-Star and Teleon is still in a really good spot in this meta. It's not seeing a lot of play for some reason, but it's pretty good. It struggles a bit against Giratina, I guess, because it can get one-shotted. But aside from that, it like generally should live. There are more ways of being defensive in this meta as well, and so it can thrive with those. It probably doesn't play them like, I think the support of Fantina, which essentially just allows you to take like I think 120 less damage, but only if you're using like Lost Zone and you need like 10 cards in the Lost Zone or something. So you're probably not doing that, but it's still pretty good with there's the new Lake Acuity card, I think, which can allow you to take less damage, but also you just have you can play Thornton, then you have the Sharon's Care, and you have a lot of options. Although most of the option decks like Aggron and stuff are under different decks, but Arceus is still very strong in this current meta. Then we got Durant, standard mill. It sometimes plays Chandelure. Should it? I don't really think so. It's a bit clunky, but the deck's decent. There's a lot of turbo decks. I'd put it in B tier because it can just really no, I'd put it in C. It can really mess up a lot of the single prize decks that struggle to deal with it, or even pretty much any deck that struggles, which is most, because they're going to turbo through the deck with the Lost Zone engine or Pokestop or something like that, and then Durant can just mill a few cards and still win. So it's in a really good spot in this meta. Unfortunately, Durant isn't a very strong deck, but it's certainly viable. We got Rapid Strike Urshifu here. And this deck's probably in D. It struggles because it's not a very good type right now. Same thing with Machamp. Being hit for weakness by Psychic is bad. There's a lot of Mew in the format as well, so being able to spread isn't that good. It doesn't really do enough damage most of the time. So it's still good if your opponent doesn't have Mew, or if you're able to take that out with Metacham and stuff. It's really good. And it can mess up early board states of Inteleon engine decks like Palkia and Arceus and stuff. But its typing is a bit underwhelming. It is okay against Mew now, though, with the new Drapion V as a counter. So it's not that bad, but it's certainly a deck that I wouldn't really recommend you play. Now we got Flying Pikachu VMAX, probably with Hisuian Decidueye V-Star, and then Arceus V-Star. Might play Jolteon, definitely plays with Barrel. This deck, it won the World Championship. It's in a good spot right now. There's a lot of basic decks, but and there's a lot of Palkia. However, Palkia often plays Kyurem, so Kyurem VMAX isn't weak to Lightning, so its typing's not as good as it was. I'd say it's probably mid-B tier. It's not like amazing right now, but it can wall off decently. It can account for a bunch of different matchups, but in terms of those Arceus Barrel variants, it's like middle of the road. Now we got Ice Rider, which there's a bunch of ways of playing this. You can play it with Kyurem, you can play it with Palkia, you can play it with Arceus, you can play it like with Inteleons, you can play it with the Barrels. And it's probably C tier. It's outclassed by Kyurem generally and Palkia, so. And also with Aggron in the format, it's not the best typing. It used to be just like a super good type because it had like no weakness, but now there's some metal in the format, and so it's pretty um, underwhelming compared to where it used to be, where it was like one of the best decks. It's still good with Palkia and mostly Palkia and Talion. Calyrex is still a deck that can do big damage and just do a lot of scary stuff, but it's not the best deck right now. Now we got Rapstrike Malamar, and this deck's not too good. It's one of those single prize decks that can do big damage, but it's way more awkward than most of the other single prize decks, and also way less versatile. So it probably belongs in D. With these other decks, it's really in a bad spot in this current meta. And when it was good, it wasn't even that good. So it's like, it can beat decks like Arceus, I guess. Some of those VMAX decks, but that's about it. It will struggle against all the single prize decks. It will struggle against decks with like heavy disruption sometimes. Heavy disruption's not too bad, but it can struggle against decks with like lots of options, and so there's a lot of like decks that just beat it, and it's like are faster and better in it than in pretty much every way. Now we got Shadow out of Calyrex VMAX, and this deck's bad. Don't play it. It's kind of funny, but it used to be super good, but now it's not at all. It like struggles. It's like Darkrai V-Star, except it like is bad pretty much, and Darkrai V-Star is very bad. So it like you can accelerate with your ability, but there's a bunch of path. Your Showers will get KO'd all the time by Drapion V-Stars probably. The Drapion doesn't need 0 energy, but a lot of the Drapion decks play Mirage Gate, so it'll just be getting obliterated all the time. So you get caught in this crossfire of having a horrible or a bad weakness. It's not like, I'm not sure if it's the worst weakness, but it's not a good weakness. And it's just underwhelming. Unfortunately, it's in a bad spot, and it's not able to deal with most of the decks. You can add different things to boost your damage, like Lunarock, Clefairy, Mewtwo V Union, Latios and Latias, the Cresselia, the Glare and Articuno, but really none of them are going to save the deck. It's just probably going to end up being bad in the end. Now we got Blissey V, though. This deck's really interesting, and I think I'm going to make a video on it soon. There's a lot of interesting combos with like Thornton and stuff. It's in an okay spot in the meta. It's really good against those single prize decks, but it's bad against like the multi-prize decks because they can usually one-shot it, except for Arceus, but Palkia can one-shot it. The VMAX Arceus decks can one-shot it usually, and it doesn't hit very hard. So there are certainly times it can lose to single prizes if it can't heal enough as well. Miltank's not anywhere near as good as it once was, especially with the amount of Empoleon V running around. So I think the deck is down to C tier. It's still certainly viable, but it's not a deck I'd recommend you play. And now we got Eternus VMAX, and this deck's really interesting. You obviously have like an auto win against Mew VMAX, especially now with Drapion V. I'm going to put it in B for now. I'm not sure, but it's a good typing. It's not like the best typing, but it's certainly good enough. There's not too much fighting and stuff, and it can like obliterate V-Stars pretty well. It's not the most consistent deck though. There's sometimes Collapse Stadium, Path to the Peak, Avery, and those all crush you. So it's very vulnerable in that way. It's always been very vulnerable, but now is no exception. It can just also get one-shotted by Giratina V-Star, which is really bad. It can struggle to KO Hisuian Gudra V-Star. And it just has these awkward situations that it finds itself in pretty constantly. I'll put in high C. It's a good deck. I almost want to recommend you play it, except if you play it, you're gonna lose some games really badly. And not all your wins will be pretty, but it's a decent deck. Actually, I think I gotta move Ice Rider up to the top of C. It's definitely better than these decks. Now we got Leafeon VMAX. This deck's not very good. Really bad, pretty bad typing. There's some fire stuff drifting around, which is bad. It doesn't like hit anything particularly well. There's nothing like super beefy. I guess it's good against Giratina, which I think has a retreat cost of no, it's only retreat cost of 2. So yeah, that's not very good. It doesn't really have any good matchups, so it's probably D. It's not a great deck to play right now. Honestly, no, it's F. It's really bad. It struggles in like every matchup. It's a deck that I'd say don't play. We got Gyarados VMAX here, which is another one of those Arceus variants with like Aggron and Flying Pikachu. I think this is the last one. There's Charizard, I guess, but you got Gyarados again. Fine typing. It's not like that good, but it's okay. It's like very similar to the Aggron deck, and it's fine. It doesn't see as much play, but I think it's a good deck still. It's really a Jolteon memory capsule deck, but Jolteon's really good against Cramorant decks and really good against, obviously, Inteleon decks. So it's solid B tier. It's not a bad deck by any means, and it's certainly one that you could try out and have some success with. And just very strong deck. Now we got Jolteon VMAX, a deck that has decent typing, good against Palkia, but there's a lot of Manaphy, and Manaphy is really bad for this deck. Its low HP is pretty bad as well. It will get one-shotted by like Giratina, which is really bad. It's horrible against healing decks. It's not horrible against healing, but it's not great. So it's in a bit of an awkward spot. I think putting it in the bottom of C is fine. I can really wreak havoc on single prize decks, but there's a lot of Manaphy, so it's weird. It's not a great spot. It's not the worst spot it's been though. So if you want to play it, but I wouldn't recommend it over other decks really. Now we got Flaffy Toolbox. This deck's never been that good. It's like a fun deck where you kind of play with a lot of different lightning Pokemon. It's cool, but it's not that good. It's D. You certainly have a lot of decent attackers, but nothing that's like amazing. You'll struggle in a lot of matchups. It's a good typing, being able to hit Palkia, but as I said, there's Kyurem and a bunch of Palkia lists. So it's not going to be able to always beat Palkia, which is pretty bad. It's pretty vulnerable. It takes a lot of pieces, time to set up and a lot of pieces. So it's D. You know, it's in an okay spot in the meta compared to normal, but it's just not a good deck. Now we got Dracozolt VMAX. This deck's really interesting. Just being able to pretty much stop your opponent from like doing anything. It's as good as it was before. It's good against Palkia. It's good against like Gyarados. Gyarados isn't that popular, but there's not too much fighting. There's a Decidueye V-Star popping around in Flying Pikachu lists. But I'd say it's still B tier. It's C. It's not like it can get consistently donked, which is really bad. And it can also it can like just misses pieces, and then if it misses what it needs, it will just lose. So I'd say it's C. You know, it's not the worst deck, and it can be really good in single prize decks. Specifically Cramorant, because you'll be taking tons of prizes. You'll be taking like 2 prizes every turn because you one-shot Cramorant with your attack because of weakness. Then when they attack into you, they're going to die as well. So it's a decent spot, but it's not. It's a deck that never sets up super well consistently. Now we got Sylveon VMAX. This deck's bad. It's okay typing. It's not great though. It's probably bottom of D, I'd say, which is no. It's like top. Actually, no. It's top of. I'm not really sure where I want this. Most of these D tier decks are bad, but I'd say it's maybe middle of D. Split the difference. It like hits hard, I guess. It has Tex against Mew now, and it can play like Empoleon V, which is really good. And it's in like a okay. It has like decent typing because you can play all sorts of stuff. And it has like the Arceus, just generic Arceus deck. It's fine. It's a D. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend you play it, but if you want to mess around with it, have some fun. It's not the worst, but probably don't do it. Now we got Zoroark Toolbox. This deck's like this is C, I guess. It's not a particularly strong deck. It's really weird. It like always looks different every time you see it. It's the most toolboxy deck in the game, and it's kind of cool. I don't remember if it has any good new tools, but it's pretty useful because you can just you can react to any matchup except for dragon types. So the fact that there's so much dragon in the format's really good, really bad for it. The lost zone stuff's kind of weird. It can kind of take advantage of that and maybe stall out some and buy some turns with boss and then Glenn Slowbro for game, but that's not too common. So I'd say it belongs in C. We got Rayquaza here. This deck's bad. It's D. It's like an Arceus deck, kind of like Sylveon. Lots of pieces, very clunky. It can one-shot anything, but Dragon type's good ability, but it's a bit awkward most of the time. Now we got Duraludon. This deck's really good right now. I'm tempted in putting it in A. I think it's B though. It's not broken, but it's not even that good in this meta. There's some special energy, but it's not everywhere. And Arceus is always good, but Duraludon isn't one of those decks that highlights Arceus' strengths. It's kind of like saying Arceus like Duraludon before Arceus was kind of garbage because it would never set up. With Arceus, it kind of sets up, but it doesn't always set up. So the lack of consistency is pretty bad, and the it's not particularly good in any matchup. There's not too much special energy, so I'd say it's a B. Rapid Star Inteleon VMAX. This deck's bad. It's like a healing deck, but it's bad typing. Not the worst typing, but not good. You can get one-shotted by some stuff, which is obviously bad because you just lose. It struggles to hit stuff consistently. It's unfortunately just not powerful enough. So yeah, that's why I put it. Mew, we've got the big three, and it's clearly Palkia, Arceus, Mew. Mew's better than Arceus right now. It's just so fast, so strong, obliterates decks all over the place, and it just so good. The healing is really good with the is it Psychic Leap attack on Mew V, which you can copy with Mew V Max, so you can consistently heal every turn. In which case, you can just win automatically against single prize decks. Sometimes you can also it's just really good right now. Really fast, really consistent, and one of the decks that I'd say you should know how to play against. It's in a bit of an awkward spot with Drapion V, but it can still beat those decks. It won't beat them most of the time, but it's fine. It's a good enough deck to be able to take an auto loss, and it just beats everything else pretty much. So it's really good. I'd say it's the best deck in the game, but Drapion V is really problematic because it one-shots it for free. So we got Gengar VMAX here. Okay typing. Dark type is good against Mew, but fighting type weakness, whatever. It's a deck that hits okay. Probably bottom of C with Dark Patch, Mew Engine, stuff like that. You can hit good damage pretty consistently on the early game. You won't one-shot stuff unless you're playing Houndooms, which you could play Houndooms, but it's an okay deck, but I probably wouldn't recommend it over most of these decks. It doesn't bring anything new, but it's an okay deck. I got QM VMAX. This is a really good deck. It just hits so hard. It's like Palkia. It's like Palkia Ice Rider, but now you're replacing Ice Rider with Kyurem, and Kyurem VMAX is really good because you are just able to they completely obliterate everything because you have unlimited damage output, and so you just one-shot everything. So pretty much your opponent will throw up some VMAX or V-Star, and you'll use Palkia's V-Star ability and Kyurem's ability, and then just get a bunch of energy and then just KO them. And then after that point, though, you won't have access to Palkia V-Star, so you can struggle, but you can just fall back on Palkia's attack or Kyurem's attack for not as much energy or something like that. Pretty much you'll be able to one-shot anything at one point during the game, and then at another point you're able to counteract with just normal Palkia attacks and stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's the better Palkia build because it's less consistent, but it's certainly very, very strong and a very scary deck to watch out for. Of course, there's also the issue of Aggron. That's probably why Aggron's so good, because there's so much Kyurem. So Very good deck. Now we got Cramorant, which is different than this comfy deck here. Cramorant is just Cramorant with maybe Articunos, might play a Sableye or might play a Radiant Charizard, but really it's mostly Cramorant. Games deal big damage with Cramorant, and this deck's pretty good. It's I guess it's B. It attacks for free, which is really good. It's surprisingly consistent with the Colress's Experiment and the Comfies, so you get off your attacks really consistently. You can hit solid damage for a single prize or basic, and you can recover stuff with Nessa or Rod or whatever you want. You have Sableye and Amazing Rare, or sorry, not Amazing Rare, Radiant Charizard, so you can just kind of hit through stuff as it happens. Generally, though, it's mostly just Cramorant, as I said. Nothing crazy toolboxy, but you are able to deal with threats. You usually get the first attack in as well, and that's really important. You'll trade evenly with pretty much everything, but getting the first attack in means you should be able to win every matchup, assuming they don't heal. And there's some healing. That's why Arceus is good. Mew's good. Throwing a Cheryl and Kyurem or Palkia is good. But it's not. It's a deck that can do really well. So now we got Clefairy. I covered this deck on my channel recently with Basket Legion. There's a bunch of ways of playing it though. With Mewtwo V-Star down here, Shadow Rider. It's just straight, and with Weird Ear, they're all good, but it's not amazing. I think it's probably top of C though. With Basket Legion, it's just so strong. If you haven't seen that video, I'd recommend you check it out by me, or you could watch it by someone else. But it's so strong. It just consistently hits big damage. It's not super consistent, but within a few turns of the game, you'll be hitting big damage with Clefairy, and then you're almost guaranteed to be able to hit 200, at least 200 damage with Hisuian Basket Legion. Quite possibly being able to one-shot a V-Star for free as a stage 1. So you can just hit big damage. It's not a bit of a weird deck to play, but it's very strong. Now we got the Comfy, which is the Lost Zone box deck, and this deck's insane. It's definitely A tier. Deck it can counter like anything. It's probably the third best deck in the game right now. I'm not sure. There are some other good decks from the new set coming up, but it's so strong being able to have all these powerful options. You got the Cramorant, which is good early game. It's not the best attacker in the world, though. But then you got yourself a bunch of other attackers. Notably, you can attack with Radiant Greninja or Radiant Charizard to hit big damage or big spread. You can also go in with I think there's the Snorlax, which is just a solid 3 energy basic. You can go in with the Drapion V. You can go in with Raikou V, so you can counter all the best decks. You can go in with Ice Goo to wall. You can go in with Empoleon V to like counter stuff. It's just so good right now. Hits so hard. I'm tempted to say it's the best deck, but it really struggles against certain counters that turn off its ability, like Empoleon. So I can't put it at the very top, but it's very strong. A deck you want to be really wary of, and the Comfy box Lost Zone decks are really good. Speaking of Lost Zone decks, we got Giratina V-Star, which is there are a few more Lost Zone decks, but Giratina is a big one. It's very good. It hits really hard. Actually, I think I'm going to have to bump Arceus down to B here, which is really crazy. But there are so many one-shotting decks. The top row is pretty much all one-shotting, except for Comfy box, which is a single prize deck, but really good because it can just hit like a truck. Giratina can. It just one-shots like anything, pretty much. It's a bit inconsistent. I feel like Leafeon V and Zacian V in that deck are really good. The Psychic Zacian V. And so you can accelerate energy, but you got Sableye and Cramorant during the early game, and then you got Giratina V-Star. And I think Professor Poke pointed out in their video that the Giratina is so good because it has no weakness, so it probably won't die. It certainly can get knocked out. Palkia, Mew, Kyurem. I mean, Palkia not by itself won't one-shot you, but Kyurem and Mew can definitely one-shot you. In which case, that's not great, but it's not like an auto loss or anything if they one-shot you. But if they don't one-shot you, you just obliterate them. You can use your first attack into your V-Star power and just one-shot 2 massive Pokemon. That might just win you the game. It probably won't, but after like a few attacks, you'll just have won. So it's so good. It will take out massive threats on your opponent's side of the board if it sets up, though. It's a deck that struggles to set up sometimes. It can be played with Arceus, then you lose out on Star Requiem, but it's really good right now. We got Hisuian Gudra V-Star. This deck's quite strong. It's a very tanky deck. It's a deck that really won't ever get one-shot, so that's really good. It can get one-shot by Giratina's V-Star power, but aside from that, it's not invincible, but it's really strong. You can do the Fantina. The big issue of the deck, though, is its inconsistency during the early game. Same issue with Giratina V-Star. Once it sets up, it's really good, but V-Star power is nice, being able to buy an extra turn. You can get one-shotted, though, occasionally. It's not too big of a worry, though, but Kyurem can one-shot you. But it's generally a very tanky deck. I'd actually put it above most of these decks. It's better than Drowland, better than Cramorant. Very strong, a very tanky deck. Got these three big tanky decks. The Drowland, Gudra, and Arceus showing how good healing and defensiveness is in this format. So we got Hisuian Zoroark V-Star, though. This is another turbo deck. This deck's not that good, though. I'll put it in C. It can hit really hard, really fast, but it often doesn't because it just doesn't set up quite well. So, and it also will get one-shotted because you usually put damage on all your own Pokemon, so you're going to find yourself in weird positions where you don't have, where your Pokemon all have almost no HP. Your opponent can spread damage or do just a bit less damage and can knock you out. So kind of bad against that new Sableye and the Lost Zone box decks. So it's C. It's not bad, but I'd recommend you try it out if you want to and if you have it, but it's not the best deck. Radiant Charizard here. This deck's pretty good with Inteleon. It's C though. It's probably here. It's an okay deck. It struggles to hit numbers on the defensive decks or the VMAX decks. It's really good against Giratina. It's not even that good against Giratina because there's a lot of Cramorant right now. So it's a deck that certainly struggles in this meta because of all the water. There's really bad typing, unfortunately. But, Radiant Charizard thrown in other decks is really good, but Radiant Charizard as its own deck with Inteleons isn't super good. Now we got Mewtwo V-Star. This deck's bad. Don't play this. I don't know why you'd play this. It hits bad damage. It's like Shadow Rider. It hits harder, but it just will die and it won't one-shot stuff. So it can one-shot stuff. I guess I'll put it above Shadow Rider, but don't play this deck if you want to win games. We got Lunatone here now. Lunarock. This deck's okay. It's like Clefairy, but worse. It's not that much worse than Clefairy, though. Probably around here. It's still the annoying ladder deck that we all know and hate. It's not that obnoxious, honestly. It doesn't do that much, but it hits hard. Can be played in very similar ways to Clefairy. I wonder if a Hisuian Basque Legion build of Lunarock can be good, but it's good because it can hit decently hard, but it's bad because it doesn't one-shot stuff usually. So let's see. Weaker version of Clefairy. Dragapult here. This deck's fine. I haven't really played it much. I'll probably play it some. It hits hard. Not that hard, but it hits the bench hard and does damage counters, which is really good when there's so much mana for you right now. So I'd highly recommend playing Dragapult if you can get around the fact of stuff like what's it called? The Drapion V, which is actually really scary. It does less for each Rapid Strike, Single Strike, and Fusion Strike card you have in play. And you might play you're probably playing the Rapid Strike Salbal, so it'll have the ability to just mess you up with that. The deck's decent though. It's a good spread deck. It might be the best. I think it is. Yeah. Ignoring stuff like Sableye and Radiant Greninja, which are really good single prize spread options. Now we got Reshiram, amazing rare here. This deck's really good. It hits really hard. It's a Lost Zone box deck. It's probably C tier though. It struggles to consistently be able to set up, and it also can get wiped out by single prizers. So it's a bit awkward. It struggles against Cramorant. It's really strong in the right matchup, but also it can struggle against V-Stars. or sorry, V maxes. It's good against V stars because you can one shot them. V maxes you might not be able to one shot though, and if you're two shotting, you're probably losing. And it's bad against single price decks, so struggles against a bunch of the current meta. Also, Soon Gudra V star can't one shot that, so a bit awkward meta wise. But now we got Frostmoth box here. This deck's probably bottom of C somewhere. It hits decent damage. You got some options. You got Empoleon V. I can't stress enough how good Empoleon V is. It completely obliterates Lost Zone decks, usually. It's not an auto loss for the Lost Zone deck, but they can play Path, but they need to tech against it. Empoleon's so good, and Frostmoth can use that right now. It can use other stuff like Radiant Greninja, which is fine, but it's not the strongest deck, but it's C. Now we got Crobat VMAX. Don't play this deck. It's bad. It's been bad for a while. Straight Wheezing is probably better. I didn't put Wheezing 10 on this list because no one really plays that. It's kind of grouped in with Hisuian Samurai V-Star though. But Crobat is bad. There's the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, so you can do more damage, but hit and run isn't good, unfortunately. In this meta, its health is really weak as well for a 3-prizer, so you're just gonna get one-shotted. Yeah, it's not a good deck. Okay, now we got Yveltal Amazing Rare. Played with Arceus, not with Regis. And this deck's really good. I think this is an A-tier deck. It's a deck I went over on my channel, which I definitely would recommend you check out if you haven't seen it. It's such a strong deck. It just instant KOs anything. It's super defensive as well in a really good way. And it's a pretty consistent deck. It doesn't have the Path, but Path's not even that good right now. So it's just the best, it's probably the best Arceus Barrel deck. The other Arceus Barrel decks are fine. They don't have anything really good about them, though. They're just like, oh, I got a V-Star and a V-Max, and I do some damage, and that's it. But Yveltal Amazing Rare, Flying Pikachu is walling, but that's about it. Yveltal Amazing Rare, though, in the Arceus Barrel deck, so strong. Just being able to one-shot anything, so highly recommend that deck. It's not like the best deck in the format, but honestly, it's better than Giratina, I think. Giratina's not... It's a good deck. It's one of the best decks, but it's not perfect. Now we got Charizard VMAX. Don't play this deck. I don't know why you would. It might be the worst deck in the format. It's a horrible typing. There's so much water, everywhere, with Palkia and Cramorant, so, half the decks you're going to play against at least are probably water decks. Cramorant's not an auto loss, but it's pretty bad. Same thing with Palkia. You can play with Arceus, but it's why wouldn't you just play any other Arceus? You got the Arceus VMAX decks up here. They're way better. Arceus Yveltal, way better. Just Arceus, way better. So it's the worst way to play Arceus. It's you take a good deck and make it bad, and you got Arceus Charizard. So don't play this. We got Stonejourner. Very similar to Dracozolt. It's really bad though because it doesn't do any damage. It's a control deck. It can do damage, but its typing's kind of bad. Or it's not as good as it was, where there's all this Arceus. So it's probably low C. It's okay, it heals, and that's it. It can do decent damage, but it's pretty much always just gonna lose if your opponent's deck is setting up, and it's not that good against it's okay against single price decks, I guess. But there are some decks that just do big damage and can one-shot it. If you're against Giratina V-Star, you just lose, so that's pretty bad. Yeah. Zacian V. Okay, this deck's really bad. Another F-tier deck. I don't know why you'd play this. It's not, good in this current meta. It was good, but it's not now, so don't play it. Now we got Mewtwo V Union. This deck's with Miltank. This is the control deck, so it's not good. Don't play this. There's Kyurem, which one-shots you. There's Giratina, which one-shots you. There's Yveltal, which one-shots you. Yeah, so don't play this. It's bad right now. It's not the worst, but it's probably bottom of C. So yeah. So this is the tier list we got. Really cool tier list. We got a bunch of new decks. We got Comfy, Toolbox, Kyurem, which is kind of new, and Giratina. And the Arceus deck with Thornton is new. So a lot of really good new decks. The meta's not crazy though, because there's still a lot of the Arceus, Mew, and Palkia decks on top of the meta. So this is a really good meta in my opinion. that I enjoy playing in. I was able to pick up Palkia and Mew with the transition to the new sets as well, so that's pretty fun for me. Hopefully you picked up some cool decks. Comment down below your favorite deck. Also, if there's anything you think I did wrong, I think this tier list is pretty good. Not perfect, though. I think I have pretty much every important deck here. But, yeah, I hope you enjoy this tier list. I'm really excited to make more content in the Lost Origins meta and some other stuff as well. And I'm really excited to see you all in the next video.